Well, hello. I'm Bruce Hawley, and welcome to Circus History Live. Circus History Live is presented monthly by the Circus Historical Society. Previous recordings of our program are available on the CHS YouTube channel. Tonight, in celebration of Women's History Month, we're very pleased to have as our guest famed animal trainer Kay Rosaire. Chris Berry is our host tonight. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. And Kay, what a wonderful opportunity to get together and talk to you, not only about your life as a performer, but also to talk to you a little bit about a project that is near and dear to your heart, the Big Cat Habitat in Sarasota. So welcome to Circus History Live, Kay. Let's just get right into it. I mean, you come from a family of performers that goes back a long, long time in Europe.
Very long. And we actually don't know how far back they go. Probably to the time of the court jesters, I would think, and we don't know the character of all of them either.
Well,
But yeah, it's a huge history in our family, and it's on both sides. Both my mother's family were from Ireland, and they had a circus called Kay's Circus, Kay's Family Circus, which is Kayes. And my uncle Tommy was a famous lion trainer in England in the 30s. But in my mom's family, they had eight children. They had four boys and four girls. And as well as my dad's family, the Rosaire family, they had four boys and four girls. So they all had their own shows just in their own family. They only hired a few other people for the shows. So they were interesting family circus, very popular.
Your mother, Betty Kays, I mean, her father was kind of a Buffalo Bill kind of guy, right? William Kays.
Yes, Billy. He called himself Buffalo Bill Kays, but he was known in Ireland as Buffalo Bill, and he wore the garb, had the beard, the whole thing, and very popular and very loved in Ireland. There's still a few English people in Ireland that have family members that have circuses in Ireland. The Duffys. I'm related to the Duffys, and they still have a circus in Ireland.
So I want to talk just a little bit about specifically your family, your father Derek Ross, your mother Betty Kays. So when they got together, I mean, there were a lot of people in that family, but they had the ability to start their own show, right?
Well, my grandparents started the show with my dad's family, all his brothers, and he had three brothers and four sisters, and they were the whole heart of the show. And they were all talented in different areas. My dad was also an aerialist in the beginning. He did rings. And when he was 18 years old, he broke his back doing the rings. And was one of the first cases in England where somebody that broke their back actually survived. They took his shin bone out, put it in his back, and made an aluminum plate in his shin. And they said he may not walk again, but within a year, he was in the hospital for a long time, over a year. And he healed so well, and he was so fit afterwards that the military used to bring him to the military hospitals after the war to show people that were injured that you can recover. This is what you can do. And my dad would do flip-flops and somersaults all down the wards. And to promote people to feel better that you're going to be okay. So it was it's actually written up in some of the English medical books.
Really? So your father, Derek Rosaire, what are your earliest memories of being a kid around the show?
Well, I loved it. When I remember very clearly in England when my dad had the show, and they actually had wagons that were pulled by horses still when I was a little girl. And I remember all that. I loved it. I loved being, we played all day out in the fields around the show, and it was just wonderful. Played with all the animals, that I think that's why we're animal people, because we've
Well,
always around animals.
you definitely are, and you have been since you were a kid. Let's go back to kind of those early days. You're a child. You've got twin sisters who are a little bit older than you are. What were some of the first acts that you did with them?
Well, actually, it was pretty interesting because my dad, at first they had a dog act and they had the horse act. My dad had a pretty famous horse act called Rosaire and Tony the Wonder Horse, and he traveled all over Europe. But when we were little kids in England, they would do circuses in the summer. And we did play a lot of the military bases after the war. I was born in 48. And I remember my parents doing shows at the American military bases, which was great because all the soldiers were there, and all the English was so happy and grateful to the soldiers. So it was a wonderful atmosphere. And I always remember that the soldiers drank a lot of beer. And after the shows, we'd pick up all the cans of the empty beer cans and stuff. And I think that's why I like beer, because I love the smell of beer. And I think it's from my childhood around the show.
That's funny. So, at what point you're traveling throughout the United Kingdom, obviously big in Ireland, big in the UK, but the Rosaire family decides that they're going to start branching out a little bit.
They did, and what happened was when the show was too much for everybody to make a living. You have to cut the pie so many ways. Well, my dad's act was making very good money because in the wintertime, they would do theaters in England. They would do what they call pantomime. And we would do all the circuses in the summer when it was beautiful out. And in the cold weather in the winter, we would play theaters. And we worked with people like Laurel and Hardy and in the big pantomimes, big shows. And my dad would do his horse act, and my mother would do her dog act. She had a dog act with 21 Pekingese. And it was a very well received dog act because Pekingese were very popular in England in those days. And 31 Pekingese on a stage is amazing. Can you imagine?
Amazing.
All these fur balls running around. The audience. And my dad did the comedy in the act. He always have a bad dog that's chasing you or you trying to catch it. So he did all the slapstick comedy in the act. So that's how they met. They met on the theaters, I believe, and fell in love and joined together. And actually, I was just telling somebody yesterday, Petula Clark used to be our babysitters when we played theaters. She was about 12 years old. And also
great British singer.
Andrews, because their families were theater people. And so those kids were around the theater too. So I loved the theaters when we were kids. The pantomimes were wonderful. And they still have pantomimes, I believe, in England, but very popular for kids because it's for family. The pantomime is the daytime show at the theater. And then at night, they would have people like Bing Crosby and Jerry Lewis, Bob Hope, those kind of people were the night shows at the theaters in England. And of course, Laurel and Hardy were popular, very popular. They were so popular in England when they were with us that they had to put them in a car to drive them across the street to the hotel because they couldn't walk. It was mobbed. And they were wonderful. I remember sitting on Oliver Hardy's lap and he's drinking a bottle of whiskey, drinking whiskey. And we used to sneak fish and chips into the theater for him because you're not allowed to bring fish and chips into a theater. Because when you put the vinegar on it, it smells so good, everybody gets up and goes to get fish and chips. So you're forbidden to bring them in the theater. So we used to sneak them into the dressing rooms for them.
So this is a photograph of you and your sisters. You talked a little bit about your mother and the dog act. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but obviously, people have, you train your dog to sit up, to shake or whatever. Positive reinforcement is obviously a very important part of successful animal training, right?
That's the way. You see what happened in England. We had people that were concerned about animal welfare years before it became popular in America. And they actually had a time when you had to have a license in England to be an animal trainer. And there were restrictions on what whips you could use, how you could use them, what kind of force you could use. So England had to change the way they trained animals. It was no more based on forcing animals to do anything. They had to learn a way to coax them into it. So that's what positive reinforcement training is. Instead of pushing an animal and forcing an animal to do a behavior, you coax it with food. It's bribery. And then they enjoy it. They actually enjoy performing. We're working on a young tiger right now. She can't wait to get in there every day. She's like facing up and down. Oh, let's go. Because for them, it takes boredom out of their life. They have something to do, something to think about, and they love it. She's loving it. So it's great. never ever felt bad about training my animals. It's really good.
When you got, so tell me about coming to the United States and seeing a woman who really impressed you as an animal trainer.
I will, but first of all, we left England and we traveled all over Europe. My dad was so popular that he worked in all kinds of venues all over the world. So we actually came to the US in 1961 from Italy. We were in Italy with the circus, Tony's Circo Tony, which is still one of the premier circuses in Italy. And we were in Italy. He made the deal to come to America when we were at Wembley Stadium with the Moscow State Circus. Moscow State Circus hired my dad because they wanted to make the show a little more British because it was all Russian people. So my dad was there and we were with Merle Cook. He had a Cook's Comedy Car, if ever you remember any of that. But he was the other act on the show that they hired. And my dad and Merle Cook became really good friends, and he liked him because he was the first American that he'd met. So Hamid Morton came over to Wembley Stadium and saw the act and immediately wanted to hire my dad. And my dad was like, I don't know if we want to go to America. Yeah, you know, he's got 5 kids and all this stuff and all this equipment. He's like, eh. But he liked Merle Cook so much that he said, when the family was discussing it, because we always were with the family, the discussion was, my dad said, well, if all Americans are like Merle Cook, we can go to America because he's a great guy. So we did over and we were picked up at the dock in New York City. We came out on a ship called the Queen Isabella from Italy, and the guy that picked us up which was a terrible time to be in New York because I think it was around holiday time. There was a longshoreman strike, so they wouldn't unload our animals. We had the horse and chimps and dogs, and they wouldn't unload us because there was a strike. So we had to stay on the ship for about a week after everybody else got off, which was great. We had a ball. But anyway, the guy that came to pick us up was a notorious circus guy named Bob Atterbury. Did you ever hear of Bob Atterbury?
Absolutely, yes.
He was a bizarre man, and he was just that was the guy that came to greet us. And when he came to greet us, he had a black shoe on one foot and a brown on the expensive shoes, but wrong shoes. He had a wrinkled up old raincoat that it looked like he'd been laying under a car in. And he had a cigar and talked like that. He was very crude, very bad mannered. And he came to pick us up, and my mom and we're all there dressed nice, ready to, they brought a car to take us in and a big semi for the animals. And my dad, and we meet this man, and my mom is like mortified seeing him. His nose was running and it was running down his cigar. It was disgusting. But anyway, my mother was like mortified because we're British, you know, and she nudges my father and she goes, I don't know about this, Derek. And he said, oh, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. So he loaded us all up and took us to Trent, New Jersey to the fairgrounds. And we stayed in a hotel there. We lived in hotels the first 2 years we were in America. So it was kind of rough, you know. And sometimes we had apartments they rent. If it was more than a couple of, you know, if we were in a town for a week or so, they'd get us an apartment. But my mom was so cool. She had a trunk with all her cooking stuff in it. She cooked in every hotel we ever stayed at. She put towels under the door so they couldn't smell the food.
Well, big family.
Hotel room.
But you also, so George Hammond, you know, had obviously been involved in getting you over, and you worked at the Steel Pier in Atlantic City.
We did. We actually worked for the Hammond Circus for 4 years, starting right away. We were there 4 years because we did the circuses. He had a lot of shrine dates. It was a huge show at the time. So they did all the shrine dates in the winter, the summer at Atlantic City. They did some fairs in the fall. So we basically worked all year long. We had hardly any downtime. And we did that for 4 years. And amazingly, my dad got more money for his horse act and the dog act than the whole Anniford family at the time. Because
the
horse act. Yeah, it was such a huge, the horse act was pretty unique and very famous. And it was great. He won the Gershwin Award for it. So that's a big deal. And so we stayed with Hammond for 4 years. And then we had a family meeting and we all decided we wanted to make a change. And so he went with other shows then, and all different shows. And of course, by then we were all growing up, and he bought a place in Waterford, Pennsylvania, right next to Merle Cook and their family. And his wife was English, so we were all very close. And eventually we bought a bigger place a little bit further away. And that's where we had the riding academy, and we had all kinds of animals there. And during that time, my dad became the curator at the Erie Zoo because he had an accident with the horse and he broke his shoulder and he couldn't go on the road. He was pretty laid up. So he went, they asked him to come on at the Erie Zoo. So he became the curator, which was great for us because we got to work with all those different animals, all those different species. And we trained everything that was at the zoo that was trainable. We did a show called the Zoo Corral. And during that time, which was in the 60s, like 1963, 64, 65 in there, that zoo became it had the highest zoological society membership of any zoo in the country.
Yeah, that Erie, Pennsylvania zoo was very, very well known at the time. And I think that there was even a case where somehow they were able to get a couple of gorillas based upon green stamps or something like that.
That's right. That's right. S&H green stamp. She was called Sarah, and he was Harry. S&H. Yeah, I remember that was when we were there. And
about 12,000 books of green stamps, so you can buy a couple of gorillas in 1964.
Yeah, we were there, and we had an elephant came. It was because what happened was when my dad took over, showbiz came to the zoo. So we did shows. There was a lot more interesting activities going on. So it became a really popular zoo. So eventually, of course, he had to go back into showbiz because that's what we are. And after that, while we were still in Erie, he made a deal with Ivan Torres to take the Gentle Ben the bear, Clarence cross-eyed lion. That was when I got involved with lions. I was assigned to take care of the lion, the second Clarence, and I fell in love with lions. I right away said, I want to have lions. And of course, I grew up with my mom telling me all the stories about her brother and her sister, and I just thought that was a cool thing to do. And then later on, when I left home and got married, and my family was my dad mostly was very upset with me because I married a towner. Big no-no, when you're from a circus family. It's like the worst thing you can do is marry a towner. But anyway, we went on the Gaddy show was selling popcorn. That was our first gig away from home. We got a truck and trailer. We went on the Gaddy show and we had the popcorn stand. Well, the worst act on the show was the lion act. And it was a guy named Frank Mogarashi. And it was terrible. He didn't even wear a costume. He wore shorts and I don't know. He was just really bad. And the act itself was bad. He was mean to his wife. He was mean to the animals. And I used to be up in the seats selling popcorn. And I would think, this is terrible. I could do a lot better than that. So I went home that winter and I went to an auction where they were selling lions, and I bought my first 3 lions.
So I want to back up just a minute. We've got a great poster behind you for Mabel Stark, but there have not been a lot of female animal trainers in the big cage. Evelyn Curry was someone who used to be on some of those circuses.
That was the other thing that made me think about being a lion trainer earlier when I was like 14, before I was old enough to do it. We were on the Hammond show, and one of the stars of the show was Evelyn Curry, and she was very glamorous. She came in a limo and she had a crew, and she looked terrible outside the ring. She had, she was an older lady. I thought she was older, probably not as old as I am now, but we just got catered to. And I thought, well, look at how they take care of this woman. She got a limo. Wow. And I thought that was impressive. And I thought, well, if you have a lion act, maybe you get all that, But years later, I found out that she was a gangster's mall. So that's who was paying for the limo and all the crew that she had and all the equipment, because she was this guy's girlfriend. So that never worked out. But anyway, that was one of my first, and she was really good with the animals. She wasn't mean. She loved on them, and they were very gentle. And I thought that's the way you should treat animals. I like that better than the whip and chair routine.
Of course, yeah. So, your father, Derek Ross, I mean, he had a lot of exotic animals. I think at one time you had 50 horses too. It's almost like,
name is Derek Rosaire.
I'm sorry, Rosaire, yes. Uh,
You know why? Ross, it was our original family name, like generations before, but they changed it to Rosaire because in England it was cooler to be from Europe. So they gave
Sure.
themselves a French name. I think every circus family has a made up name, most of them.
So he obviously exposed you to a lot of exotic animals just because it was part of what he had
Right.
been involved with. Your brother, Derek Jr., he was involved with bears in a big way, right?
He was a great bear guy. He loved bears. See, my dad had bears when he was young. So my dad, always talked about bears. And Clayton was always interested. Well, when we got Gentle Ben the bear from the TV show, that was when Derek got involved with bears. He used to be the guy that wrestled the bear, when the bear's pretending to attack somebody. And he would play with Ben and he'd wrestle with him. And that was when he fell in love with bears and eventually had a really good bear act.
So
I
I
think
want to,
one of us, there's a reason that we work with the animals that we do. My sister Ellen is an amazing horsewoman
yes,
because
she is.
yeah, and she started when we were in Erie. When we had the riding stable, we got her a pony for Christmas. She was about 5 years old, and within a week she had the pony laying down and bowing. She was a little tiny kid. She just had a knack, and she just and we do it gently. We're not bullies, and
So
she's
I want to show a picture here. This is I think this is coming up here on the screen. This is a picture of you've been doing it for a while. By the time you had this photograph taken, this is your lion act, which I know you were very proud of. Tell us about this.
I think I'm not sure what year this was, but this was at the Onstage Theater in Long Island, New York. And you can see I'm working on a stage at a theater. So it's very cramped. Look how close the animals are together. It's very dangerous to work like that. But because I had such a great relationship with all my animals, I wasn't always in constant danger. They weren't stalking me like they can. And they cooperated and I felt pretty safe. But that's a lot of lion out there.
It's a lot of lion, yeah, and you know, a small woman basically. That's you're
I back in the day I weighed 125 pounds when I was working, and I had cats that weighed 600 pounds. So quite
amazing.
yeah. You have to be nice to them. You can't be a bully.
So you continued on performing, and then you ended up purchasing some land in the Sarasota area. Really, I guess about 10 acres, right, off of Fruitville, just east of Interstate 74.
Yeah, well, what happened was we were having a lot of trouble staying anywhere because Sarasota was starting to grow a little bit, not like it is now, but a little bit. And we were staying at a farm on Whitfield Avenue. We were staying at Carl Linares. He had a dog kennel. He had a dog act. Had a great dog act. But we stayed there. Well, the neighbors, like a half a mile away, had cattle, and they went to the county and said that the lions were upsetting the cattle and they're not giving milk anymore, which was not true because they didn't know they were there. It just because people, want to cause trouble. But anyway, we had to get out of there and we couldn't find a place. Well, I found a place on Fruitville Road where Byron Crowfoot lives, where now Lowe's is there. He owned all that land there and they lived right where Lowe's is. So we parked there for several years, like 3 or 4 years. And they were wonderful to us. They helped us with everything. They helped us move animals. We stayed there every winter and we came back every winter. And I learned a lot. I learned how to butcher cows because they were farmers and they were always butchering. They had a cooler and I helped them butcher. So I learned a lot that helped me later on. And he gave us a place to practice without anybody complaining because he had such a big property. Nobody knew we were there. But eventually we decided we needed to have our own place. So he owned a piece of property on Palmer Boulevard, which was 30 acres. So I made a deal with him that we would buy the property if I could get permission from the county to have the animals there to get the right zoning. So I took 2 years. I had to canvass the neighborhood, get people to sign things and write letters. And so when it eventually came to court in front of the county commissioners, there were 12 attorneys from the banks, because the banks owned all the land east of the freeway. They owned all these acreage for developments later on, but they owned all that land. And the last thing they wanted was circus people coming into the area and ruining it. They said we would lower the value. So I went up against 12 attorneys with I never went to college, and I did it all myself. I never got an attorney. And I went up against them. And because the commissioners, one of them remembered watering elephants over at the Ringling lot when he was a little kid. And they had fond memories of the circus. Lucky for me, because we got a unanimous decision over the 12 attorneys that came in from out of town. So it was amazing. Everybody was.
That's fantastic.
So we had 30 acres. So my dad took 10, and then we had 10 on the other side. So now each sister is on one side of me, and my sister Pam is on one side with the chimps, and her twin Linda is on the other side, and she just has horses now. But yeah.
Very interesting. So I just want to remind folks that you're watching Circus History Live. This is an opportunity for us to get together and talk about those who have gone before and some of those who are currently involved in circus history, making circus history, and have created circus history. It is a monthly presentation that's provided by the Circus Historical Society. If you would like more information on the Circus Historical Society, you can go to circushistory.org and we can tell you all about it. And I hope you'll join us again for future editions. But we still have a lot of ground to cover here, Kay. And I want to talk a little bit now about what you have done with that property and really how the Big Cat habitat has become a tremendous attraction on the Gulf Coast of Florida. But it wasn't easy, it doesn't sound like.
Oh, you're not kidding. It wasn't easy. It was very difficult because I was, I did the cat act, but I was kind of funny about where I would work. I didn't go on mud shows. I mostly worked in buildings. I didn't want a long, hard season. I wanted reasonable. So it was difficult, but I had some great years with some of the same circuses that my family worked on. I did many years on Hamid, the new young Hamids. I did lots of years with Tommy Hannafin. He was one of my biggest fans. He loved my act. So did George Carden. I worked several years for George Carden. And I was very lucky because I worked on really good shows and they took care of me. And so I would save all the money I could. I would come home and I would put every penny that I made into improving the property. And it was just a piece of land. It had nothing on it. Didn't even have any trees. It was a lettuce farm when we bought it. So it was basically an empty field, and it had pipes laid that they were used to irrigate. We had to take all the pipes out. So it was a big deal just getting the place. We had no electricity. We had to get electric run, and you have to put roads in. So it was tough because it's a lot of money when you're coming home and investing in all this. But I always had this idea, and my dad and my family shared the dream to have our own place. So as years went on, I got really lucky. I had great jobs with Vargas and every show. I loved it. I never worked on Ringling, but I was never sad about it because I had my life the way I wanted it. My own animals that I own. Nobody can take them away from me, and I can make my schedule as I want to do it, not because I'm with some big corporate show. But anyway, so eventually I ended up getting a great job at Clementon Amusement Park up in Clementon, New Jersey. And I worked there all summer, starting like in usually early spring, and then ending up I would close in September when school went back. But I would stay up there for a while because it was cooler up there than down here in September. But I made enough money there because I had my own concession stand. I sold novelties. I had 300 different items that we sold in the gift shop. So the money that I made on the gift shop and my act at Clementon literally started the habitat. I would come home every year I even stole some of the crew from Clementon to come down and do some of the construction for me. They had some great construction guys up there, and we were all friends. I was there for many, many years, and they would come down in the winter when the parks closed and help me build this place. And I would pay them, and what I can. I would broke every year when I left to go back on the road. I was always broke. One year I had to get a loan on my pickup truck to get back out on the road. You know, it was difficult, but it was always, you know, it's a quest. When you do have a project like this, or being in a circus act, it's a quest, because you try to do the best you can. You keep going. You never miss a show. You have all these rules that you make for yourself, but it's exciting and rewarding because it's a quest. It's like a challenge, you know. And I always loved to challenge, so you know, we did it. And of course, eventually, I got my brother involved. We all live within a few miles of each other. He actually lived here for many years. He rescued all the bears. We have 15 bears here, five different species of bears, because he truly loved bears. And unfortunately, he passed away at age 55 from melanoma because he was outside all the time. We're always all outside, you know. We work in the show, we work outside. Yes. So anyway, my brother did a lot of the building here, built a lot of the cages, and did a lot of, and he stayed here while I was on tour. And then he got his nice bear act going. So then he was on tour. So we were all on tour. So then I would have to hire people to take care of the animals that were here. So it was difficult. Now, about 10 years ago, I quit going on the road, and my son was on the road doing his fair show. And we were very lucky because we had one of the most popular wild animal acts on the fair shows, and we got great money. And again, we had our own stuff to sell. So we made, besides making a great salary, we made a lot of money on concessions. And again, all that money, when it came home, went to build this place. So it grew organically. And then about 5 years ago, I finally told Clayton to get off the road because we were under threats by the animal rights activists, extremists, so bad that they were firebombing circus vehicles. They firebombed a couple of trucks up in New York, and we would get threats from fairs where we were going ahead of time. They would email the fair and tell them they're going to burn us out. And I finally said, you know what? Just come home. We'll make it work here. And I was worried. I had my grandchildren with my son and his wife on the road, and all my beautiful animals and our equipment. And I thought, you know, why would I have I was worried all the time if something terrible would happen to them because of the animal rights extremists. So we brought him home 5 or 6 years, 5 years ago, I think, now, and he's been home ever since. And he's you know, he does the shows. I quit doing the shows a few years ago, and he does all the shows. And he now is slowly taking over the habitat, the business part of it too.
You have 300 animals. 300 animals out there.
300 animals.
It's just amazing. If you've never been to the Big Cat Habitat, next time you're in Sarasota, you've got to make a trip out and see Kay, because it's just an amazing setup you have there. You and I have talked about, you know, roadside zoos and things like that. And I know you have kind of in your own mind have been against those in a big way. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, because I kept saying I would stop at every little zoo, every little crappy little roadside zoo that was there. I would go see, because I wanted to see how they did it, what they did, and how the animals were being treated. And it was never good. They were always substandard facilities, but they would always have a sign next to the lion or the tiger. This is a rescued animal from the circus, abused animal. And I would go to the management and say, where did you get that animal? Where did it come from? What was the name of the circus? What was the name of the trainer? And they would say things like, oh, we don't remember, we don't know. But that's not true. You have to know, because you have to have federal documentation. When you transfer one exotic animal to another facility, you have to have paperwork or you go to jail. It's serious rules about that. Big fines, like $5,000 fine, and they take the animal. So that's not true. And they were lying. All these little horrible places were lying, claiming, because it became a thing to trash circus in this country. So every little zoo had confiscated circus animals. They weren't. Circus people don't do that. I mean, I know there's been a couple. I know a couple, but they were bad trainers anyway. They were shouldn't have even owned an animal. Never mind have them on the road. They didn't know what they were doing, and there were a few of those. But the majority of circus people take excellent care of their animals, and they don't get rid of them when they retire. They keep them because they have a bond. There's a lot to be said for the human-animal bond. And if you ever own a dog or a cat, you know. So imagine if you have an animal that you work with every day, and they love you, and they have a personality. You can't give them away when you're done with them. You can't do that. It's bad for you and it's bad for them. So we didn't get very many circus animals. We had hardly ever any. The only ones I got were from Dave Hoover when he died. And they had sent them to a different sanctuary. And then they got shut down. So we ended up with all of them here. That was the only time we ever really got circus animals.
So tigers or lions? I know you're a big fan of lions, but boy, these tigers, these photographs I've been showing, I mean, you obviously have a bond with tigers too.
Oh, I love them all. It's also an individual animal. I mean, this tiger Munchie, she was phenomenal. She was my head in the mouth tiger. She was just sweet from the get-go. She was a wonderful tiger. You get wonderful animals, and if you're lucky enough, you may have two or three of them in one act. So then you're really lucky. And then you get animals that are great workers, but they don't want to hang out with you. They don't want you touching them. They don't want to play. They just want to do their job, and I'm happy and leave me alone. You get that. And I understand that. But we also need to have animals that really you can have contact with, because people love to see that.
So Kay, with social media today, we get the opportunity to see people with pets, it seems like there's a cat video every 10 minutes, but sometimes we see people with big cats and in their homes actually. Is that dangerous? I mean, what do you think?
It's a funny thing, and they're doing it a lot in Arabia now. In the Arabs seem to love to have lions in their house. I see it
And
on
I see
Facebook.
tigers on the beach, in
Yeah, well,
Saudi Arabia.
it's not a good idea. They're apex predators, and they have moods, and they have days, good days, bad days. And they're probably more dangerous to other people than to the people that think they're their pets. Because, it's like servals. Servals are very popular, and they're class 3, so you can actually own a serval as a pet. Well, they might be good with you, but if a friend comes over, they might not. They're predators. So I don't recommend it. I don't think it's a good idea. And I think if you are going to get an exotic pet, you have to get all the right permits or you're going to lose it. And you should be educated about how to take care of it. They all require special care.
This
We
photograph,
have a whole kitchen dedicated to our feeding the animals. They prepare all the food very carefully.
I know this photograph, I guess, was taken actually by a drone.
Yeah,
There's a big cat.
Yeah, Justino Zoppi did that for me, and he was only here a few minutes, and that video is, you can see it. You can find it on our website. It's cool. It shows you a lot of the animals, and we do have a pretty good variety of animals. We have primates, we have fish, we have birds, we have wallabies, kangaroos. We got it all here. It's just
and they have plenty of space to exercise. I mean, you've given them the opportunity for people to see them to start with, but also you can tell that they have the environment that is conducive to their happiness. I've been there. I can see this.
Yeah, and all the tigers have swimming pools. The lions don't swim and they don't like water, so none of them do. And we do the best we can with what we have, but you can tell if an animal is doing okay just by the way they look. If they look healthy and they're clean and they have decent body weight, they're okay. And our animals are thriving. We've been very, very blessed, and we're
What do
very.
you feed a tortoise? Okay.
Yeah, those are the sulcata tortoises. We have a lot of them. Actually, we have too many because these are a pet that people shouldn't buy. These are little tiny tortoises that you can buy in most pet shops, and there's called sulcatas or spur thigh. Well, they live a long time, and they grow up to 400 pounds. I mean, they're not
Wow.
little, they're huge, and they eat like a normal middle-aged turtle that weighs about 60 pounds will eat about 12 heads of romaine lettuce a day. So that's a lot of money. So that's another part of the pet thing. People get these animals and don't realize the cost of having them, and then they want to dump them. We have a field full of tortoises. We probably have 20 of them.
I know you, I mean, you are such an animal lover, and taking care of these animals and feeding them, and you've set up the big cat habitat so that people can contribute to it. Tell me a little bit about that part of it. So, because obviously you can't do this just based upon admissions, even
No.
though today you had a good crowd here.
We can't at all. Matter of fact, we have the community foundations having their giving challenge coming up soon, and any money we get during that day, they match it. So it's a matching donation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we weren't originally. I was doing it on my own. That's why I was going broke. You try feeding a bunch of tigers; it's not cheap.
I'm
We have
sure
50 big cats here,
that's amazing. I mean,
more than any
50
in the
big
country.
cats. And we and the circus historians, we look back on those big circuses, Barnum and Bailey at the turn of the century, the 20th century, Hagenbeck Wallace, the big shows. I mean, they didn't have 50 cats.
No,
They didn't,
no, no. Zoos don't. Zoos have 2 or 3 because they're the most difficult to handle. They're dangerous, and it costs the most to feed them and care for them. They need vitamins. They need deworm. They need all kinds of. It's very expensive to care for apex predators. Large tigers, large bears, large lions, very expensive to keep. And that's why a lot of places don't want them. They don't want a dozen tigers because it's too expensive. So, but we have them, and the ones we have were ones that nobody wanted, and they're beautiful. And it's a sad thing. I mean, it's the bad news is that they passed this Big Cat Safety Act last year, and it stopped all the really good breeders of exotics because it's become so difficult legally to do that they're actually enhancing extinction. They're making it happen quicker because there won't be any tigers or lions in the next 20 years, I don't believe, not in this country, because nobody's breeding. And that's why we have our conservation department, because we have to have animals that we can have as ambassadors for the wild ones. There's only a few left out there. People don't see them. They don't want to protect them. They don't feel it, So for us, any animal we can save, we will save it. We'll bring it here. We'll make it happen.
If you have a question for Kay, and I'm sure a lot of us do, feel free to put something into the chat, and we will ask as many of them as we can. And we got our first one here, Kay, from Stacia Kelly, who asked, you've got 50 cats. What do you feed them? And I'm going to add the follow-up, which is how often do you feed them?
Well, they get fed once a day, and they each get an appropriate amount for their body weight. We watch them, and it changes. If they're too heavy, we give more. We actually had a problem this winter. They lost weight because it was so cold. It was much colder in Florida than normal, and they used their body weight to keep warm. So we had to increase all the food for the winter to make them keep their weight. Now they're looking good again, but you have to monitor it. They eat from anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds a day, plus vitamin and mineral supplements. And we get our meat mostly from Minnesota. We buy a tractor trailer full of meat each year. Costs us about $48,000. And we have freezers that it goes in here, and we use it as we go. We also get chicken. They get a mixture of chicken and beef, half and half.
Did you have supply chain issues during COVID?
Actually, we didn't. No, because the truckers were still trucking because it's
Sure. So I have to assume that
had money problems to pay for it. That was the biggest problem.
I'm sure you did. There's a lot of uncertainty at that time. I'm sure that when you think about the people who you interact with, the others who do similar work to you do, it's probably a pretty small group of people. During COVID, we learned about Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin, people who I
Oh,
know
yeah.
you know both of them. So did that kind of help the cause, or did it hurt the cause?
Well, you know, I think in a way it probably hurt us on the donor level because we rely a lot on our donors. And I think that when they see the, you know, shysters like that, they're more likely to think we may be that way. But I tell you what, Carol Baskin has done more harm to the animals in this country. She's the one that pushed the Big Cat Safety Act. She
Yes.
went to Washington and had lobbyists, and she's pure. And the funniest part of it is, after all her big talk about how she loves her animals and blah blah blah, and all the, you know, she went after Joe Exotic. He wasn't a bad guy. She drove him insane. He totally lost his mind because she pressured him. She took the parents' house. She did so many things to him. She ruined him financially to where his parents were homeless. He just went crazy and acted crazy. But she's the one that's the bad character. I mean, you know, I don't know what happened to her husband, but I very suspicious. And
So
a lot of questions still about it, you know. But it was funny because when that happened, uh, I've got a lot of people thinking I was Carol Baskin. I had people
oh yeah.
coming, yeah, thinking I was, yeah, it was bizarre. I like, no, nothing to do. My ex-husbands both still work here. They're not disappeared.
So one of our previous guests here on Circus History Live, Cedric Walker, founder of Universal, told an interesting story about how he needed to have a big cat animal trainer. And I think that he basically sent his cousin down to learn.
Yeah, Ted McRae. Yeah,
So,
Ted was terrific. He was such a great guy. We had so
you
much.
know, forklift driver. I mean, he had no experience, as Denise Payne reminds us here.
Well, you know, he was so lucky because when he came to join us, the cat act that I was working was wonderful. They were a wonderful bunch. I had 4 lions, 4 tigers, 2 male lions, 2 females, and 4 tigers, 2 male and 2 female. And they were lovely. I mean, they just worked really well for me. We treated them wonderful. So they were very accepting of Ted, you know. All he did for the first couple of weeks was feed him and be around him, you know. Eventually I took him in 1 or 2 and then eventually all of them, and they worked really well for him and he did a great job. It was really fun. I'm happy that we were there to help start that wonderful show.
You absolutely did. So Sylvia, who's on the call here, she says to ask you, what are the cats like as popsicles?
Oh, they love chicken livers. They love that kind of stuff. Yeah, chicken hearts, chicken livers in the popsicle. They love that in the hot weather. We
A
try
little
to,
dessert for them, huh?
yeah, yeah, chicken sickles.
Yeah, that's great. Well, as we look to exotic animals in the United States and actually worldwide, you've kind of discussed a little bit about some of the challenges that are facing people like you. We know the problems or issues that have been facing the traveling circuses, but what can those of us who love exotic animals and who love animals in general do to ensure that we're able to continue to see these animals, whether it's at zoos, places like yours, or even performing shows? What can we do?
I think the only thing you can really do is pay attention to your local politicians and see how they're behaving. I know a good friend of ours that just got wiped out up in Virginia that had the Natural Bridge Zoo. The attorney general of that state got involved with the most notorious animal rights group, and they went in to take his elephant. They wanted to take the elephant because they said it was alone, but it was never an unhappy elephant. It got the best care. They loved it. They had it since she was a tiny baby, and she had companion animals. She was doing great. Luckily, they shipped the elephant out a few days before they showed up in the middle of the night, broke into their facility with nobody there. They just broke in and they confiscated half of their animals. They killed many of them. And that's the kind of thing that happened because the attorney general of that state is an animal rights extremist, and the animal rights groups got involved, and that's what can happen. The only thing they can do is watch out what your representatives, how they feel about the human-animal connection? Are they against horse racing? Are they against horse shows? What are they against? Because these people, it's like a virus. You know, the animal rights people are actually becoming idiotic, funny people, because 2 weeks ago they went out and said that they don't want carousel horses on carousel.
Horses, yeah, I think.
Carousel, they don't
saw
want
that.
carousel horses anymore because it makes people think it's okay to ride a horse.
Yeah, I think a
Well,
lot of people said that.
when isn't it okay to ride a horse, you know? And that's the kind of idiocy that these people are promoting. They don't want kids to go fishing. They don't want you to ride a horse or they don't even want you to have a pet. If you read the actual philosophy, they don't even want, you shouldn't own an animal. You should make friends with people of your own.
Well,
I mean,
you know, I think obviously you have a very strong opinion on this, and you are someone who voices it very frequently. I do think if people have the opportunity to come down to Sarasota, see what a fabulous job you have at the Big Cat Habitat, get to know you, talk to you a little bit, I think that they'll understand sort of a different perspective. So we really appreciate you taking the time today, also, Kay, to join us on Circus History Live. You and your family are part of the Circus Ring of Fame in Sarasota. If you get a chance to go down to St. Armand's Circle, you'll see the Rosaire family down there. Your sisters, your brother, your family, as you said, going back to the court jesters of medieval Europe, probably were Rosaires in some way or another. So,
you know, we don't take it for granted. We all love our culture. I love circus people. I think the saddest thing that's happening with the circuses now is that the families are no longer producing as many children as they did. And many of the children are going on to college and not going into circus. So circus becoming more of an athletic event than an actual show. And I remember the last few times I was on the road at the end of my career, I would be on shows with people that they had no family name that I recognized. They didn't know our culture. They didn't understand our culture. They don't enjoy it like we do. I mean, circus performers are great personalities, great characters. I love my peeps. I love circus people. I think we're a unique group of people. We cover all kinds of religions and cultures and nationalities, and we get along and we have a great time. And I rue the day that there are no more circus families.
I think that with people like you out there continuing to carry the flag, the people on this call who have an intense interest in what's happening in the circus world, and also the Circus Historical Society, which will definitely continue promoting circus history of today and yesterday. Again, you've been watching Circus History Live. Kay Rosaire, what a privilege to speak to you on Women's History Month about this important part of circus history and what you have done to kind of perpetuate and become what one person calls the last of the Lion Queens. We are going to have an article, kind of a profile of you in the next edition of Bandwagon, which people should be receiving soon. And I'm going to turn it back over to Bruce Hall.
Before we go, I want to invite everybody to come down. If you come to Sarasota, come see our Big Cat Habitat. If you come and you saw this, tell them at the front gate you want to meet me, and if I'm here, I'll come and say hello. Don't forget the Giving Challenge, which is when they match our donations. It goes for 24 hours, starting April 9th to the 10th, from noon to noon.
Yes, if you're on social media and you're involved with any of the Sarasota circus pages, or actually any of the Sarasota pages, you will probably see about this Giving Challenge. It's done every 2 years. And it's an opportunity to donate, and that donation is
it's vital. It's vital. I have a lot of mouths to feed.
Thanks again, Kay. Look forward to seeing you down the road.
God bless all of you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Kay, for coming in. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to thank our host, Chris Berry, and behind the scenes, Aileen Barney, who did the recording for tonight's program, and Anya Norris, who handles our social media and YouTube channel. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for supporting the Circus Historical Society and participating in these great programs. If you're not already a member, please consider joining circushistory.org. We have a wonderful journal that comes out quarterly, a great amount of history documented articles. And again, thank you, Kay, so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And thanks, Chris, and thanks to everyone else.
And just one more thanks. Some of the photographs you saw today were taken by our good friend Paul Guthile, and also Jim Cole contributed to that too. So thanks, guys, for helping us out on the pictures tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everyone. See you down the road.
Yeah.
Bye.